The rain was falling hard that morning, tapping against the classroom windows like 1,000 restless fingers. Inside, the lights flickered weakly over chipped desks and faded posters. A group of 8th graders whispered and laughed, unaware that the man standing quietly at the front of the room was carrying more pain than any of them could imagine. His name was Mr. Adams, a middle-aged teacher with kind eyes and a tired smile, the kind that came from years of giving everything and getting almost nothing in return. His clothes were worn, his hands rough, and though his voice was gentle, it carried a weight that silence could barely hold. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one small act to change a life forever, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness. This story will remind you that sometimes, the simplest gift can transform an entire lifetime. Mr. Adams had been teaching at Lincoln Middle School in a small town in Ohio for over 20 years. The pay was barely enough to cover his rent and medical bills, but teaching wasn't just his job, it was his reason to keep going. 2 years earlier, he had lost his wife, Claire, to cancer. Since then, his world had dimmed. The home they had shared now felt like a museum of memories. Her old books lined the shelves, her favorite mug sat untouched on the counter, and her laughter still seemed to echo in the quiet. They had never been able to have children, so his students had become the closest thing he had to family. But even they had started to notice the change in him. The man who once filled the classroom with energy and warmth now seemed distant, his smile forced, his eyes heavy. He taught each day with quiet dedication, but when the final bell rang, he would pack his papers in silence and walk home alone through the gray, empty streets. Among his students was Ethan Walker, a quiet 13-year-old boy who always sat near the back of the room. His notebooks were torn, his sneakers full of holes, and his lunchbox often empty. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when he did, his voice carried the careful tone of someone used to not being heard. Mr. Adams had seen many struggling students over the years, but something about Ethan tugged at him, the way he tried so hard to hide his hunger, his shame, his exhaustion. One afternoon, as the rest of the class ran outside for recess, Mr. Adams noticed Ethan still sitting in his chair, staring at the floor. When he asked what was wrong, Ethan hesitated before whispering, "I think I have to drop out, sir. My mom can't afford school supplies anymore. She's working double shifts, and I have to help her." Mr. Adams froze. The boy's voice was steady, but his eyes were full of fear, the kind that no child should ever know. That night, sitting alone at his kitchen table, Mr. Adams pulled open a drawer and took out an old, dusty envelope labeled, "For Our Future." It was the last bit of savings he and Claire had managed to keep, money she had once said was meant for the child they never had. He stared at it for a long time. Then, with trembling hands, he whispered, "Maybe this is what she meant," and slipped a few $100s into a new envelope. The next morning, before class began, he quietly handed the envelope to Ethan. "This will cover your school fees and supplies for the next few months," he said gently. "Don't worry about paying it back. Just promise me you'll stay in school." Ethan's lips parted in shock. "Sir, I can't take this," he said. But Mr. Adams smiled softly. "You can, and you will. Think of it as an investment in your future. One day, you'll do the same for someone else." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly, clutching the envelope like it was the most precious thing in the world. It was a small moment, unnoticed by everyone else, just a teacher and a boy in a worn-out classroom. But that small act would ripple far beyond that day. Over the next few months, Ethan changed. His grades improved, his confidence grew, and for the first time, he started to smile. He stayed after class to ask questions, helped other students, and even joined the science club. Watching him blossom reignited something deep within Mr. Adams, a spark of purpose he thought he'd lost with his wife. Helping Ethan reminded him why he'd chosen this life in the first place. Years passed. Mr. Adams kept teaching, even as his hair turned gray and his body grew frail. He became known as the teacher who never gave up on anyone, the one who stayed late to help, who brought extra lunches for kids who had none, who quietly paid for field trip fees without ever taking credit. He never talked about his struggles, never asked for help. His reward was seeing his students grow into good people. But time, as it always does, took its toll. One cold winter morning, Mr. Adams collapsed in class. The students screamed for help, and an ambulance rushed him to the local hospital. The diagnosis was heart failure. He had no family left, no savings, and his insurance barely covered the basics. The doctor said he needed rest and treatment, but all he could think about was how to return to his classroom. Weeks turned into months. He lay in the hospital room by the window, watching the world go by, wondering if anyone remembered him. The school had sent flowers, but no visitors came. One afternoon, as snow began to fall outside, a tall man in a navy coat walked into his room carrying a bouquet of white lilies. "Mr. Adams," the man said softly. The teacher looked up, squinting, his voice weak. "Yes, who are you?" The man stepped closer and smiled through tears. "It's me. Ethan Walker." Mr. Adams blinked, trying to believe what he was seeing. The thin, shy boy he once knew was now a confident man in his 30s, clean-cut, successful, but still carrying the same earnest kindness in his eyes. "Ethan?" Mr. Adams whispered. You grew up." Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. "I did, sir. Thanks to you." Ethan sat beside him and told him everything. After finishing high school, he had earned a scholarship, gone to college, and later become a doctor. He now ran a small community hospital, the very one where Mr. Adams was lying. "That envelope you gave me," he said, holding his teacher's hand, "wasn't just money. It was hope. You made me believe that someone cared. That I was worth something." Mr. Adams's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted you to have a chance," he murmured. Ethan smiled. "You gave me that and so much more. You gave me a life." From that day on, Ethan made sure Mr. Adams got the best care possible. He visited every morning before his rounds, brought him books, meals, and stories from the students at the nearby school. Slowly, Mr. Adams began to recover. When he was finally well enough to leave, Ethan told him there was somewhere he wanted to take him. They drove to the old Lincoln Middle School, now renovated and full of new life. The walls were freshly painted, the classrooms filled with computers and bright posters. Mr. Adams stared in disbelief. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Ethan smiled and led him to the library, a brand new room with shelves stretching to the ceiling, sunlight pouring in through tall windows. Above the entrance was a bronze plaque that read, "The Thomas Adams Learning Center, dedicated to a teacher whose simple gift changed lives forever." Mr. Adams froze. His eyes glistened as he reached out to touch the plaque. "You named this after me?" he asked softly. Ethan nodded. "You once said that education is sacred. You were right. But what you gave me, your kindness, your faith, that was something divine. I want every child who walks through these doors to feel the same hope you gave me." Mr. Adams's voice trembled. "Ethan. I don't deserve this." Ethan smiled through his tears. "You deserve the world, sir." The students and teachers gathered around them, applauding as the old man stood there, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, his heart felt light. The loneliness, the grief, the exhaustion, all of it seemed to melt away. He looked around and saw generations of young faces smiling back at him, full of the same potential he had spent his life nurturing. And in that moment, he realized his life had mattered, deeply, quietly, beautifully. In the years that followed, Mr. Adams spent his remaining time mentoring young teachers, sitting in the library that bore his name, reminding them that teaching wasn't about textbooks, it was about compassion. He passed away peacefully one spring morning, with Ethan by his side, holding his hand. At his funeral, the entire town gathered. Former students, now doctors, engineers, parents, and teachers themselves, came to say goodbye. They placed flowers at his grave, each whispering a silent thank you. Ethan stood among them, his voice steady but full of emotion. He never had children of his own, he said, but he raised a generation. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that a single act of kindness can ripple across time and change countless lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to M and Kindness. Let's honor teachers like Mr. Adams, whose love and generosity continue to shape the world, one life at a time. Speech balloon special request, comment below and share your story. Was there ever a teacher, mentor, or stranger whose kindness changed your life? Because sometimes, the simplest gift, can change everything.